Anderson?
Well, there's several different perspectives to look at this from. If we're talking about the activities that took place last December and our policy responses to them. I mean, one way to look at it is the heavy-handedness that we observed and has been the subject of this investigation has resulted in one thing. There hasn't been a demonstration since then. Was that the goal? No. You know, that the response would be so harsh, and the year-long effort to try to discern and analyze what happened and get a report to the public and the council has resulted in a certain paralysis of the movement. And from the perspective of those who do not worship at the altar of freedom of speech, this may have been a victory in and of itself. And I would just say to my colleagues, to the public, we need to have the biggest demonstration you can put together around the same issues that obtained. Back then, it was, it was Ferguson. Now we have Chicago. We have a massacre in Charleston, South Carolina. And the comments that were made at the podium about Donald Trump and this fascist movement that we're moving in the direction of cannot succeed without the police. That's why he went to New England and got that police endorsement of that police association to validate his intentions, his bluster regarding Islamic people wanting to move back and forth out of the country like anybody else. And we seem to be rearranging the chairs on the Titanic, but, we haven't fixed a hole in the bow that's going to sink the ship. And if we keep moving along these lines, we're going to be in some serious trouble that police powers or any other kind of urban shield training is not going to contain. Because, it's getting to the point where people are having to make a choice here, I mean, are we going to support the Constitution, our ability to organize, our ability to demonstrate, or are we going to be shut down by powerful forces in the society that don't want to see this kind of dialogue takes place? And, I've been a very strong supporter of the police in Berkeley ever since I came on the council. But my support is starting to wane because these cultural things are overriding some of the oaths that we have taken, And if we keep along these lines, things are only going to get worse. If people are been discouraged, disabused of the idea that they can march in our streets peacefully, without being set upon, you don't want to drive that underground. You want it out in the front and public where people can visibly and constitutionally demonstrate their grievances with government. And if we start to remove that, either by virtue of brutal responses to it or obfuscating and dodging the issues when it comes to trying to remediate these things, you're only going to drive this stuff underground. And it gets worse then. It gets lots worse. And I don't know, you know, probably just me and the mayor are the only ones that have been in the military on this council. But I tell you, the culture that's cultivated by the type of training that you receive becomes the way you conduct yourselves. When I was in the Marines and in the early 60s, all our pop-up targets that we practiced on were Asians. You know, now they're Middle Easterners. So it kind of shifts. And so the rationale and the justification for targeting people on these bases shifts along with it. And when military weapons follow military thinking into our police ranks, you know, we have a problem. You know, it's a problem of association, because when you're in a combat situation, you're thinking about survival, and you're thinking about enemies and friendlies. And when you inculcate that into our environment here, and we start thinking about the citizenry as either being friendly or enemies, and we react accordingly based on what designation we lay on people, then we're sliding down that track. And then when you buttress that with demagogues and hate-filled rhetoric, and you see the kind of incidents that are popping up around this country, you know, the training needs to be much broader than it is now. And I'm really shocked that there's no emphasis on de-escalation and conflict resolution and prevention. I mean, we all embrace